This orchid kept declining even with regular watering. The issue wasn't the amount of water, but the timing. I changed how I water it. Here's what happened after a couple of weeks. Because this orchid right here is not thriving, it is not struggling, it is actively uninstalling itself from existence. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we in the plant world call severe decline. And when I say severe, I mean the kind where the tutorial music stops playing and the boss music starts creeping in. The leaves have completely lost their turgidity, meaning the internal water pressure that keeps them firm is gone. Absolutely gone. Instead of standing proud and green, they've collapsed into this sickly yellow-brown situation with aggressive black spotting, which strongly suggests a secondary fungal or bacterial infection decided to join the party. And then we look at the crown, the literal command center of the orchid, the point where all new growth emerges, the biological headquarters. It's dark, it's desiccated, and it looks like it is fully committed to crown rot, which in orchids is basically a death sentence because once the growth point is destroyed, there is no respawn mechanic. Now let's talk about these aerial roots, because these are not roots anymore. These are historical artifacts. They're shriveled, gray, brittle, and they have clearly stopped transporting water and nutrients a long time ago, which means this plant hasn't just been thirsty, it's been dehydrated on a spiritual level. At this stage, we are not looking at a just water it and pray scenario. We're looking at advanced systemic failure across leaves, crown, and root structure, and unless immediate intervention happens, this orchid is about 2 steps away from becoming a very expensive decorative stick. At this point, there is no heroic full plant recovery montage playing in the background. There's no miracle fertilizer that's about to reverse time. The only move left on the board is salvage, because everything else on this plant is either dead, dying, or actively decomposing like it's speedrunning biology. Yes, plants can absolutely cannibalize themselves. When resources run out, they start reallocating nutrients from older tissue to anything that still has a chance to survive. Which means what you're seeing isn't random decay. It's a desperate internal survival protocol kicking in. So we cut away the rot. We remove the infected tissue. We isolate the failure points. Because if we leave any of that necrotic material attached, it becomes a launch pad for bacteria and fungi to spread even further. And after all that surgical cleanup, after removing everything that has already signed its resignation letter, what we're left with is this tiny orchid bud. And you might be thinking, that's it. Yes, that's it. Because in orchid terms, this isn't nothing. This is a biological backup file. This little bud is still alive, still metabolically active, still capable of growth, which means the plant hasn't fully disconnected from the server yet. And later, you're going to see exactly why this microscopic survivor is actually our biggest win in this entire disaster. Before we even think about replanting this botanical survivor, we need to handle decontamination, because if you shove it straight into fresh media without cleaning it first, congratulations, you just buried it with its enemies. And what are we using for this operation? Baking soda. Yes, the same thing sitting in your kitchen, judging you silently. But let me be very clear. I did not say rub it directly onto the plant unless your goal is to personally escort this orchid into the afterlife. Dry baking soda on delicate tissue is basically sandpaper with a chemistry degree. What we're actually doing is creating a dilute baking soda solution, meaning we mix a small amount into water so it disperses evenly and becomes far less aggressive. In this form, it can help shift surface pH slightly and make the environment less welcoming for certain fungal and bacterial pathogens, without nuking the only living tissue we have left. The key word here is dilute, not soup, not paste, not I eyeballed it, and now it looks like milk. Controlled concentration, gentle application, and absolutely no scrubbing like you're cleaning a frying pan. Because remember, this bud is not durable, it is not tanky, It is a fragile-ass save file, and we are not about to corrupt it over impatience. And before we even think about placing this tiny survivor back into a pot, there's one last thing we need to handle: the environment itself. Because you can disinfect the plant perfectly, you can perform surgery like a botanical professional. But if you throw it into dry, hostile media, you just reset the problem. So what we're going to do is use the remaining solution to soak our pine bark, the very substrate this orchid is going to live in. After about 10 minutes, we are taking the bud out of that solution immediately. Because remember, this is a dilute solution, not a spa day reservation. Extended exposure. Even to something mild like baking soda water can start disrupting delicate surface cells and interfere with normal gas exchange. And what happens when living tissue can't properly exchange gases? It enters what I like to call the I can't breathe moment, which is not cinematic, it's cellular suffocation. Orchid tissue, especially something this small and vulnerable, needs oxygen at the surface to maintain respiration. Now, there's one optional but very powerful extra step we can add to this rescue mission, and that is applying a small amount of cinnamon powder to the bud. Yes, cinnamon, the same thing that makes your coffee taste like autumn. But in the plant world, cinnamon is basically a low-budget antimicrobial shield. Cinnamon contains compounds with natural antifungal properties, which means when applied lightly to a wound site or exposed tissue, it can help suppress fungal growth while the plant seals itself. And I need to emphasize one word here: small amount. We are not breading the orchid like it's about to be deep fried. A light dusting is enough, just enough to coat the vulnerable surface without clogging or smothering it. After one full day, the pine bark should be fully hydrated, stabilized, and ready to support life instead of stealing moisture from it. Now here's where things are different from planting a regular, healthy orchid, because this is not a mature plant with a strong root system and structural stability. This bud can barely hold itself together. What makes you think it's going to survive buried under a pile of chunky bark like it's in a survival documentary? So instead of placing the bud first and packing media around it, we fill the pot with bark beforehand. Create a stable base, level it out. Make sure the structure is supportive and not shifting around like unstable terrain. Then we gently position the bud on top. Not under, not halfway buried, not oops, I lost it in the bark. It needs to stay above the surface, exposed enough for airflow, accessible enough to monitor, and protected from excessive moisture accumulation at the growth point. Because if that crown stays wet for too long, we are right back to crown rot. And we did not fight this hard to circle back to the same boss battle. And only after the bud is properly positioned do we lightly cover around the base with moss, not to suffocate it, but to help regulate surface moisture and create a more consistent microenvironment. Think of the moss as a humidity buffer, not a blanket of doom. Placement is everything here, because at this stage, stability, airflow, and controlled moisture are the difference between recovery and relapse. You ever brew coffee before? Measuring things carefully, pouring hot water, watching everything dissolve like you're performing a morning ritual? Good, because we're about to do something that looks suspiciously similar. Except this is not caffeine therapy. This is orchid rehabilitation. We're mixing everything together with hot water. Not boiling like we're cooking soup, but hot enough to properly dissolve and activate what we're adding into it. And before anyone gets ideas, no, we are not drinking this. If you sip this expecting espresso energy, you're going to get disappointment and possibly regret. This mixture is for this orchid right here, because sometimes recovery isn't just about structure and placement. It's about giving the plant a controlled boost in an environment where it can actually absorb what it needs. Hot water helps dissolve components more evenly, creating a uniform solution instead of random floating particles doing absolutely nothing. But temperature control matters. Too hot, and you risk damaging delicate tissue or beneficial compounds. Too cool, and you don't fully integrate the mix. So we treat this like a controlled preparation, precise, intentional, and absolutely not a snack. Because at this stage, everything we introduce either supports recovery or becomes the next problem. And we are not brewing failure today. And now, for the final ingredient in this botanical potion, we're adding 3 tablets of vitamin B1. Yes, vitamin B1, also known as thiamine, the same vitamin your body uses for cellular metabolism and energy processing. And before anyone says, wait, plants make their own thiamine, you're absolutely right. They do, but under extreme stress, transplant shock, root loss, severe decline. External B1 supplementation is often used to support recovery and reduce stress response intensity. The plan from here is simple, but simple does not mean careless. We take our recovery solution, and instead of flooding the entire pot like we're extinguishing a house fire, we water gently around the bud first, not directly on top of it, not drowning the crown, but around it. Because what we want is moisture in the surrounding media, not liquid pooling at the growth point like you're trying to start crown rot part 2. By watering around the bud, we allow the hydrated bark and moss to wick moisture gradually toward the base, creating a stable, evenly moist environment without suffocating the tissue. Controlled hydration, not chaos. And once that's done, we move to containment. We seal it inside a dome. Yes, a literal cover with ventilation holes, essentially creating a temporary greenhouse. Fast forward 3 weeks, and now look at it. Because this right here, this is what patience looks like. You can already see new growth emerging. Tiny leaves pushing outward, fresh roots beginning to extend. Delicate, yes, but undeniably alive. This is no longer a maybe it survives situation. This is active recovery in progress. Those new leaves? That means the meristem is functioning. Those new roots? That means nutrient and water uptake pathways are being rebuilt from scratch. And remember what I said earlier about that tiny bud being a win? This is why. Because as long as viable meristematic tissue remains, as long as there is even a small, living growth point, the orchid retains the biological blueprint to rebuild itself. Now the ordeal doesn't end here. Because recovery isn't a one-time event, it's a controlled routine. At this stage, we're going to start misting it as well, using the same solution we prepared earlier. Yes, the same not coffee mixture. If you've already run out, don't panic. Don't start improvising with random liquids from your kitchen. Just make a fresh batch. Same ratio, same dilution, same control preparation. Consistency matters here, because what we're maintaining is a stable recovery environment, not running chemical experiments every 3 days. Light misting helps maintain surface humidity around the young leaves and developing roots, especially while they're still small and not fully established. But again, controlled application. We are misting, not showering it like it just finished a marathon. Too much surface moisture without airflow. And congratulations, fungal spores are back in business. So gentle mist, stable environment, repeat as needed. Because at this point, we are no longer fighting for survival. We are supporting steady growth, and that is a very different mission. And what do you know? After 4 months of consistent care, controlled humidity, measured feeding, and not panicking every 12 hours, this is what we ended up with. Look at it. This orchid is no longer a brittle stick fighting for survival. It's upright, structured, and confidently pushing out broad, glossy green leaves. The foliage is firm and fully turgid. Smooth surface, healthy sheen, no collapse, no yellowing, no necrotic drama. You can see the leaves arching outward in a clean, symmetrical fan, thick at the base, tapering elegantly toward the tips. And right at the center, the crown is alive and active, pushing new growth like it never considered quitting in the first place. Down at the base, fresh roots are visible, pale, plump, and gripping into the moss layer with intent. Not shriveled, not gray, not brittle museum artifacts. These are functional roots actively transporting water and nutrients like they clocked back into work. The entire plant sits stable in its pot, elevated above the bark surface, just like we planned, supported by moss that's doing its job without suffocating anything. This is no longer a rescue case. This is a restored, metabolically active orchid with structural integrity and forward growth momentum. It's like that one relative you don't see for years. Last time you checked, they looked like a talking fishbone, and now they show up well-fed, well-dressed, and somehow glowing. Same plant, different trajectory, from near-terminal decline to stable vegetative growth in 4 months. And that is what happens when you respect plant physiology instead of guessing and hoping. And there you have it. From a single dying bud on the brink of uninstalling itself to a fully stabilized, actively growing orchid reclaiming its place in the pot. No magic spells, no mythical revive potion, just controlled intervention, patience, and understanding how the biology actually works. If this little resurrection arc taught you anything, let it be this. Never underestimate viable growth tissue, never rush recovery, and never bury your crown like you're hiding evidence. If you enjoyed watching a plant go from botanical obituary to comeback story of the year, go ahead and let the algorithm know. A simple like tells it this wasn't just chaos, it was educational chaos. And if you want more deep dives into orchid care, more plant rescues, more controlled experiments that walk the line between science and mild insanity, you already know where to find them. Stick around, because we're not just growing orchids here, we're rewriting their survival stories. See you next one.